It's time for Talkin Tauntauns, your Star Wars source at AIPTcomics.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Talkin Tauntauns, the official Star Wars podcast for AIPTcomics.com. I am JJ Travers, and I'm joined today, as always, by my two co-hosts, Jim Lehane and Connor Christensen. It's finally here, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, we have the Mandalorian Season 2 premiere. Chapter 9, The Marshal.
When one chooses to walk the way of the Mandalore, you are both hunter and prey. This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
How excited are you guys?
It's the best thing to happen in 2020, which is a low bar, but I'm very, 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 very excited to talk about it. As soon as I finished, I got up at like 9 o'clock in the morning to watch it. Like, it was the first thing I did. I didn't even get out of bed. I just immediately turned on Disney Plus and watched it. Really, really excited. I slacked you guys as soon as I finished watching it because I wanted to talk about it. So yeah, this is going to be great. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I waited till the end of the day and muted everyone. So I didn't open Facebook or Twitter, and I muted Slack, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to hear any of this. And I'm glad I did, because I wasn't spoiled about anything. But the name of the episode, the Marshal, definitely gave away like some of the rumors that they were talking about. I'm like, oh, apparently, like, even before the episode started, as soon as I saw the name of the episode, I'm like, I guess those rumors are now confirmed without even the episode like opening.
I had the same thought, Jim, when it popped up, the Marshal. I'm like, oh, cool. So Cobb Vanth is going to be in this for sure.
I didn't see the episode name until we sat down to watch it. And I didn't get to watch it until last night. I was a full day late on it, but I did the same thing. I just I have 3 Twitter accounts on my phone, one for the site, one for me, and one for the wrestling podcast. And I just only used the wrestling podcast account for the last day and a half, and I muted the Star Wars channel on Slack. And I didn't open Reddit because that's just a minefield. But yeah, it worked. I went in without any spoilers whatsoever, and the fiance and I had a blast watching it, and we both had the same "that was awesome" reaction when it was over. I loved it. Off the top of my head, I don't really have any significant complaints. I was a little annoyed just at how the Sand People talk, just the noise of it. I appreciated so much that they were that devoted to like the language and the culture and showing us that, but I was just like, man, these guys are so obnoxious with how they talk. Like, listening to that for more than 5 minutes in person could drive a person mad, but that's not like a legitimate complaint about the show. It's just like, so yeah, I thought they knocked it out of the park. I am delighted with it. I loved that it was an hour, and I'm so hopeful that future episodes are beyond the 35 minute format.
I'd be interested because I know last season when they did the Tusken Raiders that they had actual deaf people as the Tusken Raiders, and that was real sign language that they were using. And they this season it was a little different in that because last season the Tusken Raiders didn't actually talk. They just were 100% sign language. So I'd be interested to see if the same people were brought back for their role, because clearly, as far as I'm aware, that was legitimate sign language again that they were using, and it'd be really awesome if the same people were back and they just kind of dubbed over, because clearly I don't think anybody there was talking in Tusken Raider. I don't know.
Impressive if they were.
Yeah.
I had no idea that they were using actual legitimate sign language and had used deaf actors for the first season. That's really cool.
Now, one thing, am I the only one who noticed and was just a little bit uncomfortable with just how many Tusken Raiders died in proportion to how many of the Freetown inhabitants died. Like, it seeed like
Mos Pelga.
Mos Pelga, thank you. I'm using the aftermath term, which we'll get into. No, I was noticing. I'm like, man, the writers here really killing off a lot of Tusken Raiders and like none of the minors.
The one that got me was the first one.
Yeah,
when
that was
he
brutal.
was late when he was putting out the bantha as bait. I'm like, oh, that was harsh.
It was harsh, but it was also pretty funny. Come on.
It was funny, but I also was like, damn, that's dark.
Well, part of it I took as well was that the Tuskens are ruthless warriors, and I took it more as like a cultural thing. Like, they're just not like, they're afraid, but they're also just like more brave and more willing to put themselves at risk. Man, but the first like acid puke death, I was like, oh my god. Like 6 of them just got melted.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. And somebody pointed out to me, they were like, yeah, like that was Star Wars' version of Dune. And I was like, I didn't even think of that.
It was pretty much Dune and Tremors all in one.
And then I saw somebody on Twitter said, like, I've always said Tremors would have been better if they just had jetpacks.
So, I guess since we're at the top of this, there's the question of fan service, and fan service that comes. Fan service and Star Wars are often hand in hand. As anybody who has seen anything in Star Wars, did we like the fan service? Did we think it was too much? Because, like, what do we have here?
Connor did. He sure did.
We had
Connor
our
loved.
We had R5 randomly show up. We had
Vance,
a certain
Vance
pod
vehicle that he
racer.
was riding
Oh, I'm
around
sorry.
in.
Was there a pod racer? I didn't notice. What? Was there a pod racing engine that somebody was using as a speeder? No, I didn't catch that at all.
I did double check. I double checked and lined up the images to make sure we knew exactly whose pod racer it was.
So is that in fact? Because my first thought was like, oh, that looks a lot like Anakin's pod racer. Is it actually his pod racer?
I don't know in story if it is, but it is way too similar to not be Anakin's. Like, I don't see them making that close a lineup between the two pod racers. It basically was missing one of its fins on the front of the pod racer, like, and it was rotated.
It had 2 of them instead of 3, right?
Yeah, and Anakin's, though, it had 1 on top and 2 kind of sticking out of the bottom. Cobb's, it was rotated so that had 2 on top.
No, on the wider topic of fan service, I mean, JJ called it. I loved the pod racer. I was like, yes, I feel seen. But the thing is, I didn't have a problem with it because this felt like fan service through Easter eggs, not fan service through plot reveals.
Easter eggs. Boba Fett is not an Easter egg.
Boba Fett's not an Easter. Yeah, but that also is something that like they've been teasing for I guess since last season. So I don't really see that as fan service because it's like I don't think they're doing this for the fans. I think this is just what they had planned. So I don't really have a problem with it. The type of fan service I have a problem with is like what we got in the Rise of Skywalker, which we've talked to death. You guys know that I like that movie, but it does have a problem with like it's like the kiss at the end, for example. That to me is like bad fan service, where it's like you're clearly doing this just to appease a certain section of the fan base, but you haven't really earned this moment in the movie happening. Like, it just kind of happens because you know fans will like it, despite the fact it doesn't really connect or really make sense. Whereas in this season premiere of The Mandalorian, it more felt like it felt like a wink to the hardcore Star Wars fans. And I think that's what the fan service in season 1 was like too, where if you are a diehard Star Wars fan, you'll pick up on these little things. Like the R5 thing, most casual Star Wars fans aren't going to notice, like, oh yeah, that's R5 from A New Hope. Like, that's the same droid.
Did you notice? He had a burn mark on his top.
Yeah,
It's a bad motivator.
Awesome. He's got a bad motivator.
I must bring up Legends here in that there's a Legends story where R5 is called Skippy, the Jedi droid.
Yeah.
And so he will always be Skippy to me.
To me, that is one of the many legend stories that exemplifies why legends are not as great as we remember them.
So, this episode is a perfect example of why I think The Mandalorian is so great. Because I watched it with my fiance, and being the nerd that I am, I was pointing all the little things out like that to her. But she never would have noticed it. But at the end of the show, she was like, I loved that. That was amazing. Those Easter eggs being there had no bearing on her ability to enjoy the show. And I think that goes for anyone that watches this. I was talking to a friend recently who has never watched it, and they're just not really a Star Wars person. They don't dislike it. It's just like not their thing. And I was like, well, you should really give the show a chance because you don't need to know a thing about Star Wars to enjoy it. And that's what this episode was for me. Just like the perfect example of that. Like there's so much here for the hardcore and lifelong diehard Star Wars fans to nerd out over. But there's also so much here for any fan, whether you're new to Star Wars, you're casual, whatever, to enjoy. And that's part of why I love this show so much. Like it's for everybody. And I think this is the type of show that is going to help make a lot of new Star Wars fans. And I hope this is the approach that Disney takes with more projects. Like I love stuff from the Clone Wars era. I love the period of time that the Star Wars comics are in right now, but it's a huge galaxy. Like, let's get out there and explore more stuff that we've never seen before with new characters, because clearly this is an example of how well it can work.
So an interesting thing to note is kind of, I was using the term fan services. Yes, it was a little bit of fan service, but it was like a lot of people using it as a negative connotation. Like, so that's kind of wanted to bring up the topic. But one thing to note, like if this was pure diehard fan service, what are the two words you would have expected in this episode that we didn't get? Nobody mentioned the name Boba Fett. Never came up once. And that is I'd say that name is more recognizable than even his armor is. Or I guess the children's armor that Cobb Vanth was wearing that looked like Boba Fett's armor.
That's unfair. I thought he kind of looked. I think the only person who was like, I think he looks kind of cool.
Well, my friend on Twitter noted, she's like, it looks like it's way too small for him.
Yeah, it does.
But the funny, I looked it up. Timothy Oliphant is literally the exact same height as Jeremy Bulloch. They are both 6 feet 0 inches tall.
Maybe he's broader. He's a thicker boy.
Yeah, but that's in real life. That's not in Star Wars.
Well, but if they're both wearing supposedly the same armor, they should fit the same.
Well, not if in Star Wars one of them's 5 or 6 inches taller than the other.
What you guys don't understand is the science of Beskars. It actually expands over time, which is why it fits looser on him.
Well, the helmet looks too small. It looks like he's wearing the children's version of the helmet.
Yeah, I mean, part of it for me was
shrunk
like,
in the wash.
The first time we saw him was like, okay, this is amazing, but he's wearing armor that wasn't built for him.
Yeah, but I think that was the point. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying, JJ, about this. The Mandalorian simultaneously is perfect for people who know little to nothing about Star Wars. But if you are like us and you are that diehard fan, there's a lot of nudges and winks that make the show better. So like for example, for us, knowing who Cobb Vanth is, what his background is, how he got the armor, that reveal was like awesome. Like we were like, oh, there he is. This is great. I've been wanting to see that. But even if you know nothing about Star Wars, you only know the Mandalorian, you can still go into that moment where Cobb Vanth is revealed and go, oh, that's cool. Somebody who clearly isn't supposed to have Mandalorian armor has it. How are they going to deal with it? Like, so the show works on two levels because it works very well for the newcomers who know little to nothing, but it also does a great job of, I was going to say servicing, but that's not the right word. But it does a great job of making sure that the diehard fans get a little bit of extra. Yeah, thank you. That's the perfect term. It's a little more rewarding if you are a diehard fan, even if, and this is something I want to get into, even if there are some canonical inconsistencies between what is written in Aftermath, which listeners can't see this, but we're on webcam right now, and Jim has Aftermath out right now to read us a passage, I think. But in Aftermath, the way Cobb Vanth describes getting his armor is pretty different from how it's described in the show, and I'm not sure why. Jim, you look giddy. I'll let you take it away.
JJ?
Well, I just want to say, Connor, before Jim tells us what's in Aftermath, Cobb Vanth, he could have been lying.
Well, that's what I brought up in Slack is somebody had asked like what we think of Cobb Vanth, and I mentioned that, well, what he says in Aftermath versus what he tells the Mando is very different. So either it means one of two things. And I think both of these things, and I told Jim this too the other day, and I think both of these things are equally possible. The first option is that Cobb Vanth is hiding something and he lied to Mando, and he's not this like wholesome good guy that he pretends to be, which I can totally see that happening, and I think that would be a cool little character development. So that's the first option. The second option, which is equally possible, is that Disney just doesn't care that much about canon and just threw it out.
But the thing is like going back about Disney not caring, and it makes this tie-in really weird because one, you have this novel Aftermath, which was written in 2015. It's basically a story about this group of people, including like Wedge and their fight against the remnants of the Empire. But it has these interludes that kind of take us to different places across the galaxy. And that's really where this Cobb Vanth chapter comes from. It's an interlude in the story. It is literally 5 pages long. I don't remember exactly if he comes back. I didn't double check if he comes back in the other Aftermath books, but he's not the primary source of this story. He is barely in this story. Even if he is in the other books, he's barely in it. And so you have this one character which could have completely have been overwritten, but he wasn't. He was actually brought into the TV show, and pretty much like the same way. He was brought in as a Marshal who had Boba Fett's armor. And he, even in the book, he is from Mos Pelga, which is they went out of their way to talk about Mos Pelga in the show. And so it's one of those, like, they clearly used the book as a source, but then they changed where he got the armor from. And it's such a weird, I was talking to you, Connor, like, it's so weird how they changed this. It's like they went out of their way to use the source, and then they went out of their way to change the source,
and
still keep so much of it.
Yeah, and we talked about it. It's not such a drastic departure that it makes that big of a change. It just begs the question, why did you change it? And for those who don't know, I'll try to sum this really quickly. I'm not going to summarize how Cobb Vanth describes getting the armor in the show because you've all seen it. But in Aftermath, basically what happens is Cobb Vanth is approached by the mining company who has taken over the town,
which we saw in the show as well. We saw in the
show, and it also, it turns out that the mining company is just a front for a criminal syndicate. But he's approached by a representative who needs to barter with some Jawas to get something for his boss. So Cobb Vanth agrees to help this representative barter with Jawas. While they're bartering with the Jawas, they're looking through all their wreckage and their salvage. He sees the Mandalorian armor. The mining representative says, "Oh, my boss will like that. I'm going to take it back to him." And Cobb Vanth says, "No, I'm going to take it." Cobb Vanth shoots the mining representative, takes the armor for himself. So that's how he gets it in the book. And then you see how he gets it in the show, and it's not that much different. You know, it's not so different that it, like, you know, changes the character or, like, is this, like, fundamental change to lore overall. Because if I'm not mistaken, even in the book, he still goes back and he frees the town using the armor. Like, that part doesn't change. So, like I said, it just begs the question, why change it? It seems like this unnecessary, like, middle finger to the extended stuff. Unless, I think JJ's about to point out, unless he's lying.
Well, that's why I don't take it that way. And to your earlier point of it seems like they don't care, this to me says they care a lot. The fact that they purposely chose this character and included him in the story. And I just can't help but imagine Matt Martin, Pablo Hidalgo, and Emily. I never pronounce her last name right. I feel really bad about it, so I'm just going to say Emily S. the three members of the Lucasfilm Story Group, I can't help but imagine them listening to this show, which I'm sure they don't, and laughing hysterically at you, Connor, because I think this was a very purposeful decision, and I think they knew very well that there was fans like us who would immediately notice the discrepancy and start freaking out about it. And I feel like that must be really fun for them. And I think there's a reason behind why they did that, because why would you mess with canon when it would be so easy to write it in?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. It's like you included so much of it. Why change this? And I personally, I didn't actually notice the differences. I noticed somebody had brought up that, well, what about the differences in canon? And I'm reading the story and I'm like, so much of this lines up, but it's like out of 10 pieces of canon that you have, like 3 don't line up, but 7 do. And so you're right. It could have been like, I take the novel as what actually happened because it's not somebody telling us what he did. Whereas opposed to like him telling us what he did could be definitely like him lying. It felt weird, but I didn't notice it right off the bat. I had to go back. I haven't read the book in 5 years. Like, no, I'm not going to remember 2 pages out of a over 900 page trilogy.
All right.
Yeah, I to put the final nail in the canonical inconsistency coffin. I really hope that it's like, yeah, you're supposed to have caught that because he's lying. I hope that's what it is, and I think that would be great. If it's not that, and it turns out like, no, they just kind of ignored their own canon, I'm gonna be a little upset because it's like, well, now you have devalued all of the non-movie and TV shows because you have shown that you're willing to ignore that. So I really hope that it turns out, oh no, he's just lying to Mando because he has some ulterior motive, or he did something to get the armor that was less than savory. Either way, though, one last thing on Cobb Vanth, and it's not really on Cobb, it's more on Timothy Olyphant. I need more of him in this show. He was so good. He was like the best part of the episode. Like,
it was fantastic.
Yeah, Timothy Olyphant. I never know how much I wanted Timothy Olyphant in Star Wars until this. And now it was like, oh my God, he's so good at this. This is awesome.
I wasn't surprised whatsoever. I think he's one of the more underrated actors in Hollywood. I think he is incredible in everything that he does. I don't necessarily like a lot of the projects that he takes on, or they're not my personal, just preference for what I want to watch. But I've always recognized and acknowledged him as a exceptional actor, and I thought he was fantastic here. But I mean, we can talk more about his role in this episode. But before we do, I kind of want to bring us back to the start of the episode with Mando and the child showing up on this unidentified planet into the underground fighting arena with the Gamorreans with the swords.
I completely forgot about that part of the show.
I thought the opening to the show was like the second I saw what happened, I was like, okay, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be so good. So to set the stage, he came looking for information on a Mandalorian, and he was told that Gor Koresh, that I forget what species he is, but he kind of looks like a cyclops.
Yeah, that's
like an Cyclopsian or something like that. But the point is, he's some like criminal of some sort, an information broker, and he lures Mando here with
Abyssin.
Thank you. Kind of the false promise so he can get his hands on his Beskar armor. And just the scene of Mando not showing an ounce of fear, arming the what the heck are they?
The
missile
rocket thing.
It's a chirping bird.
It's something bird.
The little missiles. You guys know what I'm talking about.
We're Star Wars experts, people.
I have to find it. Hold on 1 second.
That will be on our next trivia. What is the name of the little thing? The things. The things.
The wrist things. The needles. They shoot and they're like missiles.
But
Whistling
they like
bird.
home. They
Whistling
home.
bird.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the whistling bird missiles and just the child pulling the lid close on his little floating crib. I just thought that whole thing was fantastic. And the following fight scene with the Mandalorian killing like 8 guys by himself.
Well, when he pulls out the Beskar knife and throws it at the spiked head people.
Was it the Deveronian or?
It's making me so mad I can't remember the name of this speechy. The Dobrak, right?
Oh, the Zabrak.
Yeah, Zabrak, thank you. When he hits the Zabrak with the knife, I was like, okay, it's pretty sweet. But if we want to, you brought up something, JJ, that I forgot. We want to talk about fan service. Let's talk about the fact that they squeezed in all of the Baby Yoda adorableness in the first, 2 minutes of this episode.
Incorrect.
They were just like, here you go.
Incorrect. The best Baby Yoda scene in the whole episode was him on the speeder bike with his ears flapping like a dog out the window. Best scene.
He is ridiculously adorable.
There
was multiple spots during the show where I was just like, come on. And he's a puppet, too.
I think I giggled every time there was just a shot on him. I just was like, oh, look at him. He's having so much fun.
I loved when Oliphant was like, we gonna do this in front of him? And Mando was like, he's seen worse. And the kid's just smiling and making little cooing noises.
I just want at some point in the show for someone to be like, you want to do this in front of the kid? And Mando to go, he's actually 60 years old. Just point out, he's really not a kid. He's quite elderly, actually.
I was actually kind of surprised with the child through the episode. The child didn't actually do anything. There was no every time the crate dragon, which I want to get into at some point, the crate dragon was on screen, I kept expecting the child to do a little force something to help them out with it, and he did nothing. I was really I think that was
the down low, man. We don't want too many people knowing about those special powers.
I was wondering that too, if there was some off-screen conversation between Mando and the child where they decided, hey, you can't do that in front of people, only in front of me. Because I agree, Jim, I thought that was kind of weird. I'm like, oh, he was only there for cuteness, which, don't get me wrong, love it, absolutely love it. But you could have removed the child from this episode entirely and it would not have affected the plot at all.
I think that's okay, though, because he is, after all, a child. And while he does have force powers, using them, has made him faint or exhausted him in the past. So if it doesn't work,
he always seemed to use that. He always seemed to use them when it was dire needs.
Yeah,
and I feel like when your daddy goes down the gullet of a giant snake, worm, lizard thing, I feel like that would have been one of those times ago. I may want to help him out here.
But what was he gonna do though?
I don't know. I'm not a 4-inch high alien force Jedi thing.
All right, let's back up a little bit more. So after Mando wipes out the information brokers, he captures Koresh with his fiber cord, ties him up. You won't die by my hand. I think we all knew that meant it was soon to be feeding time, and it didn't disappoint. And we got the unknown red-eyed creatures from the shadows devouring him.
That was big time Batman Begins vibes, where at the end of Batman Begins, he's like, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you either. That was, first of all, really good Batman. You don't have to tell me. I know it was good. That's what I thought of when Mando did that. I'm like, oh, he's just going to leave him there, and it's going to be great. And then when he turned and he shot the light out, I was like, oh, that's even better. It was so, cool. There's no other word. And I think that's what's the best about the Mando character. He just oozes coolness. Everything he does is cool. And that was, the coolest way he could have opened this season was stringing a guy up and leaving him to be eaten alive. Super badass.
Hey, he was asking for it. The Mando was willing to pay for the information. So then we got Amy Sedaris, who's awesome. A.k.a. Pelimoto. And her scene with the child were definitely the, oh my god, he's so insanely cute and adorable. And then we got the R5 Easter egg. And then that old rusty speeder bike. Q, Tatooine Outpost, Bandit Town, I forget the name of.
Mos Pelga.
Yes, thank you. And then we came back to Vanth, where we started. So here's a question for you guys that kind of skips ahead before we get to the crate dragon here. What do you think that Mando's gonna do with Boba Fett's armor now?
So I think having the armor, that's an interesting question, because he didn't want Boba Fett's armor. He didn't want the armor. He wanted a Mandalorian, and he didn't get a Mandalorian, but like clearly this guy doesn't belong in the armor. So he's like, I'm taking the armor. I don't think he even wants the armor. It was just kind of a side effect of his hunt. He really needs a Mandalorian.
But his creed requires that he takes it, and I don't think it's just going to get forgotten in the ship. I think it'll definitely have some use in this season.
Well, I think it'll somehow tie to our sneak peek at the end of the episode.
So here's what I was kind of thinking is, with the armor in hand, it doesn't change the fact that he still needs to find a Mandalorian to help him, and he still needs that guidance. And I think what might happen is he'll find the Mandalorians that he's after, and he'll say, oh, also I recovered this armor from an imposter, and he'll hand it over to them, and they'll say, oh, you found the imposter Boba Fett. And he's going to be like, no, who's Boba Fett? And then I think eventually this will lead to a showdown between the Mando and Boba Fett, who we can get into it, was not 100% revealed at the end of this episode, but it would be super surprising if that's not Boba Fett. So I think
especially given the content of the episode.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's Boba Fett. So I that's what I think's happening is going to happen. Is I think you're going to have he's going to go return the armor, think he's doing this great thing. They're going to be like, oh, great, you defeated Boba Fett. And he's going to be like, no, I defeated a guy, this guy named Cobb gave it to me. He's actually a pretty nice guy. We're going to go get drinks later. He's a cool dude. He's coming to my bachelor party. And they're going to be like, no, this belonged to Boba Fett. He's not a real Mandalorian. He was, a turd or whatever. And then eventually, I don't know if that means we're going to have, like, Mando go on a mission of, like, honor to defeat Boba Fett for being an imposter, or if they're going to have, like, a B storyline where a different Mandalorian goes after Boba Fett, and we'll see that, a new Mandalorian, maybe Bo-Katan tracks down Boba Fett, and we have a fight.
Here's a question for you guys. Seeing maybe Boba Fett here.
So, let's preface this is that it was 100% Tamora Morrison who we saw.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
No question.
Yeah.
Well,
we know
I even waited to the credits.
Who played Jango Fett and is the DNA map for all the clone troopers that were based off of him. So we know it's someone, either a clone trooper or Boba. We know that.
And if it's a clone trooper, he would also be twice as old as Boba. Because, well, theoretically, unless they fixed that issue, which there's no indication that they have.
He could be a member of the Bad Batch.
But I think they still aged at twice the rate.
Maybe. Well,
because the Bad Batch was the same age as all the other clones, where Boba was still a kid.
All right, I got to get back to what I was going to ask you before I forget. So do we think that is the same person that we saw standing over Fennec Shand in season 1?
I think it was Cobb Vanth who was standing over, because the armor.
And the Spurs. The Spurs gave it away. Which I remember when that came out, everyone, like, I missed that detail. Everyone's like, the Spurs mean it was Boba Fett. But yeah, I think that tease was actually a Cobb Vanth tease. Because it would make sense, a lawman going to check in on this bounty and finding a dead body. No, I think I brought it up in the Star Wars Slack channel. It's so obvious that this should be Boba Fett that it's like almost a little disappointing, because it's like, oh, there's really no mystery here. Like that's got to be Boba Fett. Like, but at the same time, it's so clearly Boba Fett. It would be weird if they pivoted away from that. That if they're like, oh no, that's Captain Rex, it would be like, oh, well, why'd you tease it that way then? So either way, I think it's cool. And I think it's rad that Tamora Morrison is back. And that's two of the rumored castings from the off-season confirmed in the first episode, which I think is a little surprising. So, but yeah, I do kind of hope that Boba Fett plays a role in the season. I know Jim would love it.
All right, so doing quick math, if it is Boba Fett, then he would be, because Boba Fett doesn't age, isn't accelerated aging. He would be roughly in his low 40s. I'm guessing 43, but that was quick math. I didn't actually double check. And if it is the double-aged clones, then he would be in mid 80s.
So he either
looking like Boba Fett.
Yeah, looking like Boba Fett.
He either looks really bad for 40, because he did. Am I the only one who thought, like, when they showed him, like, oh god, he looks like hell? Like,
Oh, I mean, he's been through hell, man. Come on.
He had a very Wade Wilson Deadpool look to him, like very scraggly, for lack of a better term, very scrotum-esque looking face, very wrinkly.
He was beaten up.
Yeah, and that's another reason where it's like, yeah, this is probably Boba Fett, because, like you just said, a guy in his 40s should.
Well, Tamora Morrison is also 60.
Yeah, that I was gonna say. I know Tamora Morrison's a little.
He's
bit,
up, man. Okay, he's had a hard life. I did love the Gaddafi stick on his back and the Tusken rifle as well. Just the quick little shot of him with those weapons. I was like, okay, this is really cool.
I'm in on that. Yeah, it was a cool tease for sure. Like I'm glad they squeezed it in, and that's one of the rumored castings that I was hoping would be true, and it was. So that was a sweet little tease, and I hope, though, my only worry is, and we've all seen Rebels and the Clone Wars, that Dave Filoni loves to do this thing where he teases something and then ignores it for many episodes.
No, he doesn't ignore it. He makes you wait. There's a difference.
Yeah, I know, but it's still frustrating. Like, I did read one review, for example. I think it was USA Today. They were one of the few outlets that wasn't super glowing about this premiere, because they were saying, like, ultimately this doesn't do much to advance the overall plot, and the fact that, like, you end last season with this big Darksaber reveal, and then the Darksaber's not in this at all. And for me, I didn't care. I was like, yeah, I didn't expect it to be there.
I think we said it
whatsoever.
I think we said it at the end of the last season. I guarantee you 100% that it wouldn't be back in. That's Filoni. That's Filoni's MO all over it.
I would not want them to start with that.
Let's
get some build up to. Let's get some anticipation. Why would he immediately be right back with them? Like,
yeah,
are we having Moff Gideon's entire story after that moment just being chalked up to he's fine now and stuff happened, but we're not going to tell you about any of it? Like, yeah, no,
yeah,
he's good.
No, I'm glad they didn't immediately, like, all right, cool, like, now let's get into this Moff Gideon Mandalorian showdown part 2. I think that's going to be saved for the end of the season. Like, I think it's going to be, like, I would assume it's going to be, like, the last 2 episodes when we're going to get back into that.
Honestly, Din Djarin's story for the next 3 seasons or the rest of his character's life could be him just endlessly seeking out a way to reunite the child with his people and never achieving it, and I'd be fine with it. If this is the road that they're going to take with the story and the character, giving us amazing locations, creatures, interacting with the natives, characters from past stories, new characters, underground fighting rings, bounty hunters, assassins, like, if that's what this is and we never get a resolution with the child and they do it later on through a film or a book or a comic, I'm not that upset about it, because the formula so far is working really well.
I can't imagine they will not give us a resolution with the child. The child is the show.
Mark it down, Connor. Famous last words.
I'm going to give my prediction, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but I believe I've said it before on this very show. I'm almost certain that this series is going to end with a heartbreaking, tragic death of the child. And it's going to be awful, and it's going to make a lot of people upset, but it's going to be really good. But because it just doesn't make sense that he's not, like, how can he be this powerful of a Jedi, but then he's not Luke, for example,
Well, he's
doesn't
not a
ever
Jedi,
mention
number
him.
one.
Well, it's a Force wielder. So I have this terrible feeling like, oh, we're all so attached to this beautiful baby, and in 6 years when this show ends, we're gonna have to watch this baby die.
Wrong.
All right, Psycho.
They do not kill children. Just like they don't kill Ahsoka, they will not kill the child.
Master Skywalker,
I was gonna say Star Wars doesn't kill children.
what are we going to do?
I never saw that child die.
Yeah, so speaking of the child and the crate dragon, and there was also the massives, just like from a costume, creature, and environment standpoint, man, what a gorgeous episode. Everything about this was so immersive, felt so much like Star Wars. It was gorgeous. I don't know how much money went into making this episode, but I'm guessing it was a lot, because holy crap. The crate dragon is obviously CGI. It still looked incredible. But the costumes, like the Tusken Raiders, the Banthas, I don't know what they were using for that. The Tusken dogs, the massives, the Boba Fett armor, everything looked so good.
Yeah, I think they definitely upped the budget. And one thing that I noticed, there was only one part where I thought the CGI looked a little off, and that was with the Tusken dogs in that valley. I don't know what they're actually called, but that point I was like, oh, they look a little wonky. Other than that, though, it definitely seems like they not only did they it looks like they shot more on location, not just in the volume. It looks like they actually went to some desert location to shoot some of these Tatooine scenes, but also it looks like they got away from using the Unreal Engine as their primary source for the computer generated stuff, because the CGI in season 1 was never bad, but it looked video gamey. And that, like I said, that's not bad. It's just when you compare it to other pieces of Star Wars, it's noticeably a little lacking. But this season, I didn't, with the exception of that scene with the dogs, I didn't notice it at all. And I think all of it looked so much better, and like they pumped even more money into it, which is awesome. And I love the fact, I don't know if this is a money or a budget thing, and JJ touched on it at the top, but I love that this was a full hour. Like, it wasn't a half-hour episode. Like,
It was the longest episode we've had yet.
yeah, like, and I hope that's the new norm. I hope they keep going with a full hour, because I believe if you put all of the first season, all 8 episodes of the first season together, it's a little over 3 hours, right?
One thing on that I have some strong feelings on is I absolutely hope that we're getting longer episodes, and that's the new format. But at the same time, I don't want them to make each episode an hour because they have an hour. It makes me think of the Marvel Netflix shows, where a lot of those episodes were an hour long, and they could have been 30 or 40 minutes long. And because they had an hour and they used an hour, it made so many of those episodes pretty bad and boring. If the story can be told in 45 minutes, use 45 minutes. Like, of course, I want more of this, and I love longer episodes because it's just such an amazing, fantastic world, and it's so exciting, and it's Star Wars. But I don't want long episodes just to have long episodes.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a worry. Or maybe it is. It depends on how you read into this. Because Jon Favreau did say in an interview with Entertainment Weekly that this season opens up a lot more than the first season does. Like, he mentioned that, like, there are large chunks of episodes that The Mandalorian isn't even in. I think he even said there are a couple episodes that he's only in it for a few minutes. So I think I think we might get an hour-long episode as the norm, because I think there's going to be more subplots and more auxiliary characters this time around, to like kind of make it a more sprawling narrative and less just focused on the Mandalorian and the child. So I think you could take that either way, as that's a good thing or a bad thing depending on what your perspective is. but I do agree with you. The funny thing about all the Netflix superhero shows, and I like them all, but each one is about 3 episodes too long. Like, and it seems to me that's one thing that the Mandalorian definitely got right in the first season was there was no fat. Like, there was nothing excess. Like, everything that was in there needed to be in there, and that was it. Although it did leave us a little wanting at times, at least it was like, yeah, but none of this is wasted. With the exception of what are the name of the creatures that he rides in the first episode?
Yopi?
I don't remember, but we all know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the blurg taming scene was a little extra. Yeah, that was the only part in the first season where I was like, I get it. He's got to learn to ride this.
See, I disagree. And I saw people complaining about the this too many scenes with the Tuskens and saying it was cheesy, unnecessary. Star Wars is cheesy and often unnecessary. Like, this is the type of stuff that I want to see. Scenes that aren't necessarily required, but give us more of the Star Wars universe that we wouldn't see otherwise.
The cheese is what makes it great. Like, I think people lose sight of that. Is like, part of the reason New Hope is so goddamn good is because it perfectly flirts the line between being really authentic and honest and serious and really cheesy. Like, and it does it perfectly. So you have to, I would rather have them attempt to be cheesy and fail than completely ignore the cheese. Like, you have to have that little bit level of cheesiness because that is at the core of Star Wars.
All right. So let's talk about the Krayt Dragon, speaking of cheese. Now, the Krayt Dragon has gone through some changes in Star Wars' 40-plus history of years. Does anybody remember the skeleton in A New Hope that's kind of laying on the sand dunes?
Yes.
It was a baby.
That has often been called a Krayt Dragon skeleton. And I'm going to stand on my little soapbox here. Maybe not my lecture. I'll stand on my lecture table. That's actually a dinosaur.
Oh, and here's where Jim gets to bring in his PhD into the show.
Yes,
and really teach us some knowledge.
So that is a dinosaur skeleton, or at least the vertebrae are the skull may be fake. Probably is fake, but the neck vertebrae of a Diplodocus, probably the Diplodocus dippy from the Carnegie Museum, was used. Not the actual skeleton, but a replica of the skeleton was used as the Krayt Dragon skeleton that was kind of thrown in the sand, and as far as I can tell, was left there.
It's still in Tunisia. You can go.
The Star Wars scavenger hunters are notorious for finding these things, but from what I can tell, it was actually like pieces were found when they went back there for Attack of the Clones shooting. But yeah, that's a dinosaur. Also, doesn't really look like the Legends version of a Krayt Dragon, which Legends version of a Krayt Dragon kind of looks like a giant. It's hard to describe, but kind of I think like a giant Gila monster, like this really big animal, giant skull, which looks nothing like the skeleton in A New Hope, which it
was in Star Wars Galaxies, and it was nothing like what we saw last night.
Oh, nothing like what we saw last night, and nothing like the skeleton at all. But one thing it did have that was like a core of so many Legends stories is that the Tusken Raiders would need to go out to kill a Krayt Dragon, which as their like coming of age quest, which I don't see that happening anymore. Coming of age quest, they needed to kill one and bring home the pearl that was located in the middle of its stomach. And when they get to chopping up the Krayt Dragon, I'm like, they're gonna pull that thing out. They are so going for this. Although they completely changed the Krayt Dragon, they kept the pearl as part of it.
I'm really glad you pointed that out, and this is gonna make me sound stupid, which is fine because I am stupid. I thought that was the dragon's eyeball. And I watched it, I was like, oh, that's disgusting. Like, I didn't know it was like this. I honestly was like, oh, that's really gross that they're like going to take the eyeball as a trophy. What is God, Tuskens are weird.
No,
I'm
that's
glad it's not.
that is totally fan service. That like 100%. But it's one of those. You're right. Is one of those things that not like so many people would not get, but a lot of people would.
Went right over my head. And I know a lot of fans of Knights of the Old Republic pointed out, like, oh, this is very similar to like an early mission in Knights of the Old Republic where you have to go defeat a crate dragon. But the crate dragon in Knights of the Old Republic, I just slacked it to you guys, looks more like a giant Komodo dragon.
Exactly. That's the Legends version of the crate dragon, really. And that's what, like, when you take this in, like, I don't know, did they go back to the skeleton and go like, maybe we can make the skeleton work again? Where the head is kind of in proportion with the rest of the body, so it looks more snake-like. I think you're right, JJ. I think they kind of went back, like completely erased Crate Dragon from Legends, went back to the skeleton and said, this is our Crate Dragon. What would this animal look like if we blew it up to the size of a building? And this
I have no complaints about their choice to change it. I thought it was awesome.
My biggest
I
was going to say my biggest complaint was the fact that like this thing was burrowing through the sand, but after they quote blew it up the first time, it ended up on the top of a mountain, which means it had to burrow straight through solid rock. I didn't like that part.
Well, I took that it was able to do that because the Sarlacc being there previously had like cleared out a lot of the space in there. That's how I rationalized that part. But either way, I thought the scenes with Jaren and Vanth flying around on the Mandalorian jetpacks and shooting at the thing, the Tuskens with their clearly very ineffective harpoons and the acid breath, just the whole thing, awesome. I love seeing more Star Wars creatures, and I love seeing how much attention and care that Disney is putting into creating awesome, memorable aliens and creatures like this.
Can we talk about what I think was unintentional comedy of they detonate the first round of explosives, do a little bit of damage to this creature, but then it comes back stronger than ever, and then Mando and Vanth are like, okay, don't worry, now we're gonna step in with our little blaster rifles, and that'll really put the hurt on
just
this
keep shooting.
And then they fly into the mountain, start shooting at it, doing nothing. Like, absolutely nothing.
I thought they were trying to shoot its eye.
That's like, what I thought too at first. I'm like, oh, they're gonna shoot. Like, I thought Mando was gonna hit him with the disintegrator rifle in the eye, and it was gonna disintegrate his eye. And I was like, that's gonna be sweet. It didn't happen. So I honestly, I don't know if that was supposed to be funny, but I thought it was kind of funny how they're like, we can handle this, and they fly up, and I was like, just kidding, we can't do anything. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. It was cool to see them fly up, though. Like, I'll take any jetpack scenes. The jetpack scenes are awesome.
I want to see the episodes of Cobb Vanth trying to learn how to use the jetpack.
Yeah,
like it.
I'll expand on that. I just want to see more Cobb Vanth. Period. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only person saying this or thinking this, but like at the end of the episode, I was like, you know what? I would take a Cobb Vanth spinoff where it's just like, even if it's just like an animated show or like a miniseries, like, 4 episodes about Cobb Vanth just being a lawman on Tatooine with Timothy Oliphant. It's basically Star Wars justified. Give me that. I'd watch that. I'd watch that for sure.
Can I add in that every time somebody says elephant, it sounds like a little kid talking about an elephant? It's an elephant, sir.
I always thought it sounds like a little kid talking about Lord of the Rings. The giant elephants. Because isn't that what they're called in Lord of the Rings? This isn't a Lord of the Rings podcast. I'm sorry.
All right. Before we move on to comics, anything else you guys want to touch on the episode?
I mean, yeah, the Pod Racer speeder bike. Let's bring that back up again. That was awesome. And all joking aside, I know there's going to be some Lego sets coming out from season 2. I actually really hope that's one of the sets. I actually have the Anakin Skywalker Pod Racer, and I have the Mandalorian speeder bike. I'm trying to figure out a way where I can mod the Pod Racer into the speeder bike, because I thought that speeder bike was just cool anyway, but I would love to see that built into a Lego set, because I think that was really, really rad. other than that, one thing we didn't touch on, the musical score, because they brought back Ludwig Göransson. I thought it was even better this season. Like, it was more persistent. Like, it seemed like there was very little scenes that didn't have music set to them, but it wasn't, like, overbearing. It was really well done. So I think, once again, the music in the show is just incredible, which is weird because it's not the classical orchestral score that we're used to with Star Wars. It's much more modern, and there's, like, 808s and like persistent, like, drum beats and, like, hip-hop beats almost, and it works so well. So I think that's one more thing I want to touch on, how good the musical score was.
Can I pick one nit that a little bothered me? I realized
Pick your nit, friend.
Pick my nit that you brought up the speeder bikes again. It reminded me. Timothy Oliphant, or Cobb Vanth, gave his entire background of how he got the armor, I believe, while they were riding the speeder bikes. They were. I don't remember if that was the scene, or they definitely had a conversation while they were riding the speeder bikes.
And I thought to myself, man, they have great hearing.
I know. You literally are driving the loudest thing in the desert, which is a pod racer engine, and you're having this conversation like, "Hey, yeah, so yeah, I found this armor over here. Hold on, can you hear me? Okay, like, no, all right, yeah.
Let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah, and I'm like, God, I can't hear people when they're sitting next to me at the kitchen table.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. Which I mean, now that I'm thinking about that story too, I'm more leaning towards, like, he definitely was lying, because when he told that story, did you guys think it was a little too coincidental that he's like, I grabbed what I could from the miners and it just so happened to be a bunch of crystals? Like, that to me sounded a little sus, a little suspect.
We'll find out,
or we won't.
Who knows?
They could just completely, like, go, yeah, that's his story and that's what it is.
We're sticking with it.
It doesn't have to be true. It's his story.
Yeah, so before we leave this topic, I'll end with saying, for me, the first episode was everything that I wanted and more. I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic start, and I can't wait to see where they go from here.
Yeah, I agree. It was a lot of fun. I probably enjoyed this more than almost any episode in the first season. I would have to, like, sit back and, like, watch through the first season again, but I really enjoyed it.
I would say, without a doubt, I enjoyed this premiere more than I enjoyed the season 1 series premiere. Like, definitely enjoyed this more. And I would say, with the exception of maybe, like, 3 of the season 1 episodes, and I'm thinking episode 3 when he goes back to the Bounty Hunters Guild and clears it out, that was a standout episode. The prison break episode on the prison ship is a standout episode, and obviously the season finale. But I think other than those 3, this is probably the best episode yet. I thought it was fantastic. As you know, we just covered, I have, like, almost no complaints.
All right, let's talk about some comic books.
Yeah, there's a lot to go over since we last did a comics corner. I did some rereading last night to get ready for this. So what we are going to attempt to go over today, we've got Star Wars number 6 and 7. We've got Darth Vader number 5 and 6, which I cannot wait to talk about. Dr. Aphra number 4 and number 5. And I just read number 5 like 10 minutes before we started recording, so that's great. Bounty Hunters number 5 and 6, which I can't wait to hear Jim talk about because he had a little mishap with his comic book store that did not affect his reading whatsoever, which is not the best ringing endorsement for Bounty Hunters. We'll get into it when we get there. Star Wars Adventures number 1, which is the relaunch of the All Ages title, which I bet we will spend about a minute on because it's a kid's book and it shows. And then Jim has some thoughts on Clone Wars Battle Tales number 5, which I was supposed to read, but I haven't got it delivered in the mail yet, so that kind of sucks. But anyway, let's start off with Star Wars number 6 and number 7. Number 6, I couldn't wait for all of us to read because it has that awesome Rebels reveal with the Grand Inquisitor, and finally felt like a big piece of payoff in an otherwise kind of slow-paced start to the new Star Wars launch. So what did you guys think of the reveal of the Grand Inquisitor kind of being a ghostly slave to Darth Vader now?
That was easily the best part of that entire arc. Yeah, so that 6 was the last issue of the first arc, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that whole arc it was very slow. And
Absolutely.
felt like not much happened, but that was kind of like a surprise Easter egg where you go, that is the Grand Inquisitor. And that's because the last we saw him was in Rebels when he fell off of some platform, I believe, in a Star Destroyer when Kanan was fighting him. I don't remember exact location.
Death, and then he says, just as like, because he technically going
there's
back
something.
to
There's
Batman,
things worse than death.
Yeah, going back to Batman Begins, Kanan doesn't kill Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor just lets go of the platform so he can die. But I noticed, so he falls into a big, giant, flaming ball of explosion. And then in this comic, when he says that line again, there's things worse than death, he's still burning. So I read that, and I was like, God, this is brutal. He is trapped in this final moment of death forever at the moment without any release, and he's a slave to the dark side of the Force, and he's a slave to Darth Vader to defend this random High Republic outpost, which they had to get the High Republic reference in. Which there's another one in issue number 7 that I want to talk about. But other than that, like you said, I did think this entire arc was really slow paced. There's a lot of people losing their minds over it and saying how good it is, and it's like, well, this last issue, number 6, was really good, but I think the arc as a whole was pretty slow. But I think this Grand Inquisitor reveal and having Luke get that lightsaber almost made up for how slow the rest of the arc was. Not entirely, but was close. But I am excited to see, how they. I just want to get to Luke making the green lightsaber. Like I maybe I'm impatient, but it's kind of like that's what we're all here for. Let's get to it.
Are you excited for the High Republic? Because we are constantly, I'm going to use the word teased, but more of like prodded with an electric staff. Like it feels more like
it's a little over the top. I want to get into issue number 7. So hold on. I was going to say, JJ, do you have any thoughts on number 6?
Before we leave this issue, I have a lot of questions about it. Like why is he in that state? How did Vader get access to him and move him to this location and trap him there in this like Force essence? And also, after he died, quote unquote, we saw him in the Jedi Temple on Lothal with Kanan.
I don't think that was him.
Yeah, I always thought that was like a hallucination.
Like a force.
Well, I took it as it was him speaking to Kanan through the Force. So I didn't necessarily think he was redeemed, but I thought the Force was showing him to Kanan like at that point in his life before he became the Grand Inquisitor. But it was never definitive because we don't know how or why that happened. So I just have a million questions. Like the issue's over and we're moving on to a new arc with the rebel fleets and Leia and Zara, but man, I just felt there was so many big questions left on the table at the end of that issue, and it was a very slow series leading up to the finale there, and I don't think they're going to go back to it anytime soon, but I'm just dying to know about all of that.
Yeah, I mean this as a pun. There was, so pun intended, a lot of hand-waving here. The old hand-waving plot device where it's just like, don't worry about it. Don't ask questions. It's just happening.
There's an old cliche with geology teachers that they'll get out and explain rocks, and there's a lot of hand-waving because they'll just kind of like wave their arms around and go, and then over here, this happened, and then over there. So that's geologists well know the hand wave.
But I think, JJ, you're right. There is a lot of like, wow, how did this is... I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that I like it and I think it's very cool, but it does beg questions of how did all this happen? Like, this is kind of wild and it's super dark, but how did this happen? And how did Darth Vader know about this, like, previously unheard of High Republic outpost? And how did he know to place a guard there what secrets does it hold? I hope they go back to it, but it looks like they're not going to anytime soon. I do think it's interesting that this first arc was very focused on the Force and Luke finding the Force, and this new arc that just started in issue number 7 seems to transition to back to focusing on, okay, now we're going to focus on the war, like less on the Force, more on the war itself, and has even more, not just Star Wars Easter eggs, but like Charles Soule Star Wars Easter eggs. So you have the more subtle High Republic name drop in number 7, where Tarkin talks about the Nihil, which I didn't catch. I didn't catch it the first time. Nihil, thank you. I didn't catch it the first time. Then the second time I read it, I went, "Oh, that's a High Republic reference." God damn it! They did it again. I didn't catch it the first time. The second time I was like, "Oh, there it is." But
I want to go back before you get too far. You wondered how Vader knew about this previously unknown High Republic outpost. He got an advanced reader's copy of the High Republic stuff, and he went, "There's an outpost over here. You know who I have for that."
I've got a guy.
I'm curious if we're going to see stuff happening in that outpost once High Republic books come out, or if it was just used as a, hey, remember, this is coming down the road.
I would say with how Charles Soule loves to tie things, and I don't think this is a bad thing, he likes to take things that he writes in one Star Wars book and put it in the other books he's writing. Like I was going to mention, the carry-on spike is in Star Wars number 7. And where we first see the carry-on spike is in the Poe Dameron comic as Agent Terex's flagship, his main ship. So we see that, the carry-on spike...
Isn't it in the Tarkin novel? Pretty sure it's in the Tarkin novel.
I've not read the novel. You know I don't read books unless they have pictures.
So I think that's where it first showed up, was the Tarkin novel, but I will double check that.
But it's still like Charles Soule likes to take these things from one book that he has and put it in another book. The Mask of Momin, for example, Lord Momin's mask that is used to build Vader's castle, is in the Lando miniseries that Charles Soule wrote. So he likes to tie these things together, and since we know he's writing the High Republic novels, I would be shocked if they don't explore what was exactly in this specific temple that Luke was after in the High Republic. Because like I said, I know Charles Soule loves to tie these things together. Jim has information to drop.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia,
your go-to source for Star Wars knowledge.
Yeah, Tarkin was the first appearance.
Okay, yeah. So not necessarily Charles Soule's creation, but still there is that Soule synergy TM that he brings to the Star Wars book. So I would absolutely expect that specific High Republic temple to come into play and be further explored in the High Republic. Probably I wouldn't expect the comics. I would guess the novels, because that's what Charles Soule's writing. And he seems like he has a grander plan that he's working on across the books and the comics. Or maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Who knows?
All right. So as far as issue 7 and the impending battle between the fleets, that's all well and good, but I thought the backstory for Commander Zara was the most interesting part of the book, personally. I'm excited to see starfights. I always enjoy that. But seeing her backstory, I thought was just so cool.
Yeah, I really like how they took time to flesh her character out and do it pretty immediately. I think we're briefly introduced to her in number 6. She's at the tail end of that issue. But I did really like the background that we get of her and why she has such hatred for Princess Leia. There is this thing going on in Star Wars in general right now that is kind of irking me, of trying to show the humanity in the Empire. And don't be wrong, I understand to create good villains, you have to show their motivations and show how they're humans to make them more believable. But I feel like we're almost going a little overboard in trying to show the quote unquote goodness that lies within the Empire. I think as a whole, we're losing sight of hey, the Empire are the bad guys. They are, and they're supposed to be ruthless. Stop trying to show us their humanity. Although that complaint aside, I did like the background we got of Zara, right? I like how we got her relationship with Tarkin and why she has this vendetta specifically against Princess Leia. But also there's this moment where one of the officers on the Tarkin's Will Star Destroyer says like, well, we all lost somebody on the Death Star that day. Like we all feel, and it was this moment where I was like, am I supposed to feel sorry for the Empire here? Because like, yeah, the Empire, like, yeah, I'm sure they all lost friends on the Death Star, but the Death Star also obliterated an entire planet. So I don't really feel bad for any of these people.
It's not their fault.
They were just following orders.
We know how well that order works out.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I did, nonetheless, I enjoyed the backstory we got for this new character.
Vader, 5 and 6. Holy crap. Talk about kicking it up a notch.
Vader is once again, the Vader comics have not missed yet. Like, even the 2 miniseries they did, I thought were great. And now Greg Pak's taken over. So Darth Vader number 5 finishes up that first arc of Vader investigating what truly happened to Padme. And going back to fan service, there's a little prequel fan service with some prequel era ships that I didn't think really made sense being in this issue, but looked cool nonetheless. But it's just more of like exploring the how Vader starts to turn back to the light by finding out how much he was abused and lied to by the Emperor. And just once number 5, phenomenal end to the arc. I loved it.
I wasn't a huge fan of that arc to begin with.
How dare you?
And it ended. This is my favorite part.
I liked the ending plenty of the first arc. The start of the new arc. Holy crap. The Emperor is doing Emperor things, that's for certain. And his lessons of understanding fear, anger, hate, and power, I loved. And I loved even more when he put Vader back into the state that he was in when he found him. Except he took away his ability to use the Force, essentially, by saying, if you use it, I'll come right back here and the test is over, aka I'll kill you. And then even better, at the very end of the issue, we got something from The Rise of Skywalker that I was actually legitimately excited about, and that is Ochi of Bestoon. And if that name doesn't ring a bell for you, it's understandable. He was the Sith assassin that we saw killing Rey's parents in Rise of Skywalker, the guy who was buried under the sand and had that very distinct dagger. So he has now been deployed to Mustafar to basically hunt Vader down and ensure that he doesn't take any shortcuts on putting himself back together. So Vader's crawling along with no legs, one arm, and a broken suit on Mustafar. Like, holy crap. I don't know anything else that's going to happen yet, and I'm already blown away.
And this is after 20 pages, just nonstop 20 pages of the Emperor torturing him, choking him, electrocuting him, shattering his electronic limbs. I wrote it in our notes, this might be the most metal Star Wars story ever told. This is brutal. Like, the whole time you're reading, you're just like, God damn, stop. Like, this is ridiculous. And the moment where Darth Vader gets the upper hand on the Emperor's guards and starts choking them, and then the Emperor turns the table and starts choking Vader, and you see Vader have the flashbacks to all of the people he's choked, was this weird moment of like, oh, Darth Vader's experiencing empathy. Like, he's now realizing all these terrible things he did to other people, and he's realizing, oh no, this sucks. It was brutal start to a new arc.
Yeah, and regardless of my feelings on the Rise of Skywalker, I really loved that they brought Ochi back and kind of gave us, it's not his origin story at all, because he's already looks like he's full on Sith Hunter at this point, but you have his earliest appearance in canon. And I love that we're kind of tying things into the Rise of Skywalker, which felt very untied at the time. And so,
yeah, I mean, I would love to see a Sith assassin and follower of the dark side and the Sith religion doing his thing, collecting artifacts, assassinating people, going on clandestine missions. And the fact that they're starting that off with him hunting Vader on Mustafar is just so damn cool.
And I really like the idea of exploring the Sith lore and the Sith religion, for lack of a better term, through the perspective of somebody who's not a Force wielder. Like, through somebody who is simply like, no, I just think they're right. We haven't really gotten that. So I'm really excited for that. And they gave him a new look. They gave him that helmet and armor. And he looked really creepy in that one shot we see of him in The Rise of Skywalker. Because that's the other thing, is he's in The Rise of Skywalker, but it's literally for like 2 seconds. And he's like kind of just scary looking. But in this, he has like that really awesome looking armor where at first it took me a second to be like, Ochi, I know that name. And then I was like, oh, it's the Sith Hunter from Rise of Skywalker, because he's got such a different and cooler look. So yeah, I agree with what you guys have said. I'm really excited that he's been brought in, and we're gonna learn more about like what he did and all that.
his helmet is very much like a Star-Lord from Marvel. It's a
Big Star-Lord vibes, agreed.
I'm like, is at Chris Pratt? Is he now in Star Wars? Or
Oh no, they've sent Chris Pratt after Darth Vader. He's gonna wear him down with witticisms and sarcasm
and dance-offs.
and dance-offs.
But he has no legs, so
He can't dance. He just wiggles.
So the other issue that I was very excited to talk about, Dr. Aphra number 5.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Star Wars Adventures number 1. Just kidding.
We are at the end of the first arc, and Aphra's gonna Aphra, man. Putting her friends' lives in danger on I'm a pretty good slicer. I figured you'd be okay. Just openly saying how she's bad at showing people that she cares, and, bad at being a good person, stealing precious artifacts, killing people, basically horribly burning one of the biggest crime lords in the galaxy, and just not giving it. She's like, yeah, I've had people after me before. I've had Vader after me before.
I also loved Deta Yao in this issue. She really drops the innocent facade she has built around herself. Like she does that thing where Afra's like, I just need 30 seconds. And Deta Yao goes, oh, I'll give you 30 seconds. And then just starts killing people. Like with the cool, Wolverine-esque blade she has. I thought that was Deta Yao is slowly becoming my new favorite character in this series.
I just liked the group hug aspect that they kind of got at the end, where everybody was like back on the same team. We're like, we're all doing great. Everything's great. But what about you kind of pissed off a really important family? It'll be fine. Group hug time.
I believe Aver even says I've pissed off a lot of people. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I've had Vader after me. This is fine. I also laughed out loud after they blew everything up and were running. And Afra's like, right, now we've just got to grab Black K and find a way out of, and then it's just like, roar! And you see henchmen just flying, and Afra's just, oh. I just thought that scene was so good.
This whole issue was great. Once again, Aphra as a series is just firing on all cylinders. And I got something that I wanted. They renamed the High Republic ship they stole is now the Archangel 4. So she's got an Archangel again.
And we got Domina, Lady Domina tag, who is a significant character from Legends. And what I thought was super cool was at the start, I think it was the start of the issue. Let me go back and look real quick. It was, I don't know where it was. Oh, yes, it was early on when he's talking about his family, and how important they are, and, how He's talking about how the ring came into their possession and it signifies their greatness. And underneath him, he's holding up his hands, holding the rings, and it shows all the members of his family. Did you guys notice that Cassio was included there? He was the dude on the Death Star in A New Hope when Vader was choking that guy, and he was talking about he was arguing against being arrogant about it. Let me put a picture in the chat, and you'll know.
So that is like the tag source in Legends, is that the guy on the Death Star. And that's and so like I think when we were talking to Alyssa Wong, I mentioned like tags have a huge Legends background, and that she like marvelously pulls into this story, because they're not mentioned much in the new canon until now with this series.
Yeah, I actually I didn't even notice that little detail, because you guys know this. My Legends knowledge is basically like relegated to video games, like all the video games I played. I didn't read many of the Legends books, so I didn't know.
Put his picture in Slack for you, and you'll know who I'm talking about now.
I didn't know the tags were this like huge influential family. It didn't, and this is a testament to how good the series has been. It didn't take away my enjoyment of the series, and I didn't like feel like they weren't important. But I didn't realize like within Legends that they're this massive family who has massive influence over the galaxy. And I also didn't know this guy on the Death Star was a member of that family. And that horrendous, almost bowl cut haircut.
Yeah,
I'm like, he has a thinning bowl cut.
Yeah, it's like almost like a monk.
I saw that panel and I was like, that's got to be who that is. And I had to go look it up just to be sure. But I just appreciate a lot when a creator puts that much effort in to give nods to the past, you know?
Well, it's similar to what we were praising The Mandalorian for, is that if you know about it, your enjoyment is going to be increased, but it's not so integral that if you don't know about it, like I didn't, that it's not going to take away from the enjoyment of the series. So I really love that, and like I said earlier, it's just Dr. Aphra is just firing on all cylinders. It's so good right now. It is the Star Wars book I look forward to the most every month, followed by Darth Vader. I think Darth Vader is also very good. And
speaking of favorite comic book series, is Bounty Hunters.
I love talking about Bounty Hunters with Jim. So Jim, why don't you go into your little comic book shop mishap that did not affect your reading at all?
So before our last episode with Alyssa Wong, I wanted to make sure I was all caught up on the comics, because we weren't sure if we'd have time to do a comics corner or not. And so I was probably about 2 months behind. I got all the comics, and I read everything, and I read Bounty Hunters, and it was pretty much nonsensical, like it's been for me this entire time. And I'm going to put it into my timeline, and I'm like noticing that it like skips an issue when I'm looking at it, and then I go and look in my storage of my comic books, and I realize that I skipped from 3 to 5. I never actually read issue 4, and it didn't really impact me all that much, because the way the story jumps around so much that like you're like before and after, even their flashbacks are jumping all around, that I just kind of went with it. I just read 4 and 6. I read 4 and then 6 last night, and it did kind of fill in some of the holes, but it was the whole series. 6 starts off a new arc, and it seems like it's a little more on track to be less bouncy.
Bounty Hunters, more like Bouncy Hunters.
Yeah.
I'm not reading the series. I read the first 2 issues and it just wasn't for me. I hope it comes around, but I couldn't get into it.
I would say, first of all, not the biggest ringing endorsement that you could just not read an issue and not miss anything. That's probably not good. I have not been as harsh on this series as Jim has. Not that, like, Jim, I'm not saying you've been like overly critical. I think all of your complaints are very valid. I do think it's getting better. I think number 5 was a good, a very strong finish to an otherwise not great arc. I think getting that little bit of background on Nakano Lash and why she did what she did was better. It kind of like pulled the curtain away from her and finally made us understand who she actually was, which I enjoyed. And the fight between Baylor and Boba Fett, I think, was sweet and was pretty well drawn. That moment,
the background on why she did it was in 4.
Yeah, but it was more like fleshed out in number 5. But yeah, it was very clearly laid in number 4. But in number 5, I think you got the ramifications were better laid out. But there was that shot of Boba Fett using his jump pack to jump up and uppercut Baylor Valance, which I thought was a really cool panel. And like I said, I think number 5 was a good finish to a not good arc. But number 6, I think, is very much on track, and I like. If you're like me and you have really enjoyed the Baylor Valance stories that have been told in this new canon, from Han Solo Imperial Cadet and TIE Fighter up to Target Vader, I think you're really going to enjoy where this series seems to be heading, because it looks like they're leaning into Baylor being the main character, which is what I want, because I think his constant struggle between humanity and being a machine, plus his struggle to find what his place is in the galaxy, and seeing the faults in both the Empire and the Rebels, I think is really interesting. So I'm glad they're really leaning into him as a character and him being really the main focus of this story. But also it seems like Bounty Hunters is kind of like now going into the Mandalorian direction, where it's like you have this bounty hunter is not in touch with his feelings, is going to take this child underneath his wing and protect the child. That's kind of what Bounty Hunters is now. And I think that's like, oh, cool. We're getting 2 wolf and pup stories at once in Star Wars.
So the interesting thing about this this new arc is that they are also leaning heavily on legends. And so the last one had Boba Fett and Bosk as like your 2 Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters. This one you're getting 2 other ones, and it's Forlom and Zuckuss. And for anybody,
Flyhead the droid,
and his friends,
third person man who only speaks in third person.
But if anybody who knows the Legends continuity of Zuckuss, is that he is a findsman, and he has kind of this precog ability to know things, that kind of like the Force. It kind of he can kind of guesstimate the future, and they like flat out said that in the issue before they even introduced him. And I thought that was kind of cool. It's like now you're not only pulling these characters from The Empire Strikes Back, but their entire Legends backstory, or at least their quote powers within Legends, are being pulled in as well.
Yeah, that was another one though, where it's, it was the flip side of what was going on with Afra and what we talked about in The Mandalorian, where they like introduced these Legend things, and even though I didn't know any of the Legends backstory, I still felt the weight of their importance. Here, I could tell them, like, these 2 bounty hunters are supposed to be important, and I'm supposed to know who they are. I don't, and I just think they're kind of weird. So I think Bounty Hunters number 6 was an example of like when you lean on Legends a little too much and forget that not everybody knows what it is. Because while like I said, I do think this is going in the right direction with these 2 characters specifically. I was like, yeah, I don't know who they are, and I don't really care.
Did you get that they were from Empire?
I recognized them just simply of like, I feel like I said, I knew I'm like, I'm supposed to, these 2 are supposed to be important, and I'm supposed to know who they are. But I didn't.
I believe one of our trivia episodes, I had asked the names of all the bounty hunters, and I forgot their names, and I think Bug Guy and his friend were
Bug Guy. Like I said, it's third person man and flyhead droid person. That's who they are for me. So I mean, bounty hunters. I not to poo-poo it too much. I think it's the weakest of the Star Wars titles at the moment, but I think it's getting better. I still am not the biggest fan of the art though.
That's confusing.
Yeah, the art it's the same. It's funny. Ethan Sachs and the artist whose name I'm blanking on at the moment. Hold on.
Villanelli.
Yeah. They did the Galaxy's Edge comic together, which I really enjoyed. And I didn't find a problem with the art in that. But for some reason now in Bounty Hunters, it's a little too chaotic. And sometimes you can't really get a sense of what's going on.
Like the art itself is really pretty.
Yes.
But the using it as a storytelling medium is not working.
It is not effective as sequential art.
Yes.
Like, it's a perfect example of, it, like you said, it is pretty and it's nice to look at. But trying to follow a scene using that art style is kind of tricky.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on Bounty Hunters. Is it's a bit of a bummer because it was a series I thought had the most potential that is falling the most flat for me. But I'm a big Valence fan, so I'll keep reading it. Speaking of books that are falling flat, we can spend 30 seconds on this one. Star Wars Adventures #1. Did either of you read it?
I read it. I don't remember it.
Neither do I.
I did not.
If I recall, it is it's about Finn and Poe build a training course for Rey.
Yes.
And find out that, oops, we built it on a criminal outpost, and it's not bad. It's just like, oh yeah, it doesn't do justice. Like, I've always skipped the Star Wars Adventure books because I'm like, well, they're kind of kids' books, and I feel like they're going to be pretty inconsequential. But I decided to give this one a shot because, I'm a Star Wars nerd. And I want to, and I want more Rey, Finn, and Poe stories. So I read it, and I didn't hate it, but is it worth your time? I would say no, not really. It's not very enjoyable. I guess I would say it's awesome for kids, I'm sure, but I'm not a child.
So to kind of put it this way, if anybody who has read Star Wars Adventures knows kind of what you're getting into, it's a kidified story. You get 2 in an issue. Is this one any better than the others? No. Is it any worse than the others? No. It's exactly the same. It's written by a new author, and it starts over at #1, and you're 100% the same as what you were getting before, except now you don't have the tie-in that you had before with I can't remember the book series, like hyperspace, something with hyperspace. That
was like Last Flight of the Falcon or something like that.
No. So the second half of almost every Star Wars Adventures for the first 32 issues was focused on the same family that's escaping my memory. Milo and his droid were part of the family that was based in a kids book series, which I thought was a really cool tie-in. You don't get that anymore.
Well, this one, the backup story is just a literal retelling of certain scenes of Empire Strikes Back, but with no difference. I get it because I'm like, oh, it's the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, fine. But it also is just like, why? I know what happened at Empire Strikes Back. I don't need this panel for panel retelling of certain scenes.
Yeah, Adventures in Wild Space was the book series, and I actually really enjoyed that one. I kind of like sometimes the shorter kid books if they're done well.
I will keep reading this because it's great. It's the equivalent of background TV, except it's background comic book reading. You read it, but you don't really have to pay attention. You can kind of let your mind wander as you read, and sometimes that's kind of nice. But otherwise, not really worth your time. Jim, you want to wrap us up with Clone Wars Battle Tales #5?
So Clone Wars Battle Tales #5 is, again, it's another Star Wars adventure line where they had 5 issues that kind of related to each other. Like reading them, I before we started doing the comics corner, I would read an arc at a time. And so reading them month by month, I lost the connecting tissue a lot of times reading them. But they kind of like have this connecting tissue, and then within the story itself, you kind of do its own separate story. And #5 was really, really interesting because at first I read it and I didn't like it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I actually was impressed with how they kind of turned it around. It's basically Obi-Wan is trapped on a planet with Grievous. Grievous needs to get to the other side of this giant gorge to be able to bring supplies over. And they had blown up the bridge that was there, and so they are forcing these prisoners to build a bridge for him. In the age of Star Wars, I don't know how that makes any sense, because you literally have a ship fly in at the end of the issue to pick up like Obi-Wan and all the clones that were there. Like, you are in Star Wars. Things hover. You do not need a bridge.
I actually didn't even think about that.
But
It's like,
regardless,
you have ships.
regardless of all that, though, if you kind of take that away, you have Obi-Wan where they just destroyed a bridge and they were forced to build a bridge. This is exactly the story of Bridge Over the River Kwai. Bridge Over the River Kwai stars Alec Guinness, who is Obi-Wan. And like that sort of tie-in, like kind of, I'm like, wow, they like that's a master stroke right there, that they were able to do something like that. Like, yes, it's a kiddie version of the movie that takes place in Star Wars, but it was just kind of like the meta connection bit of the dots there that I really appreciated. Like, is the story the best? Like, no, it's not the best, but that connection makes it like great.
That's really clever.
It's just funny that they did this in the Star Wars Adventures line, because I'm going to go out a limb here and say there is not a single child who is going to read this book and make that connection. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Bridge Over the River Kwai is from like 1968, right? Isn't it a very old movie?
It's definitely pre-Star Wars Guinness. That you actually may be really right on that age. That
and I'm not saying it is a classic. Like, it's a classic war film. I'm not like poo-pooing it or saying it's not a good movie.
It's actually an awesome movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's just funny because it's like 57.
Yeah.
Okay, that's even older than I thought it was. But it's just kind of funny because, like you said, it's a very cool parallel, and it's a cool retelling of an awesome war story. But I think the intended audience of this book guaranteed not gonna pick up on what they're doing.
No,
Not necessarily for them.
No,
Yeah,
I know,
it's for
but that's
us.
what made it such a great connection, because no, it's clearly not for the intended audience. But the way I was still like mind blown when I realized, I'm like, wait, they used Obi-Wan, because I immediately caught the Bridge on the River Kwai reference, but I didn't realize that it was Alec Guinness that they used as in the both instances, and that's what blew my mind.
Well, you have me excited to read this. I should be getting it in the mail at some point. I don't know what's going on. Usually I order from Cape and Cowl Comics in Oakland. When my local shop doesn't have an issue, I'll order from them. And usually I get stuff within like a couple days of ordering it. But I ordered it on October 20th and still haven't gotten them. But I do understand that USPS is pretty slammed right now, so I'm not too worried. But when I get it, I'm excited to read it, because overall, this is the final issue of Clone Wars Battle Tales. And, I actually kind of liked it. It's not amazing. It's not groundbreaking. It's not like this classic Star Wars stuff. But, if you kind of missing new Clone Wars era stories, this'll satiate you a bit. So, I enjoyed it.
All right. That was some serious comics talk, some serious Mando talk, and some good Star Wars talk. I can't wait for episode 2. I don't know if we're going to do an episode for every... I don't know if we're going to do an episode of the show for every episode of The Mandalorian, but I'd certainly like to try. So we'll definitely be back regardless with more Mandalorian talk for you soon. I know that Connor and Jim also have both played quite a bit of Squadrons, so I think next episode we're going to have them share their experience with you guys. The holiday special is also on the horizon.
As a little tease for the Squadrons talk, I think anyone who's listened to this show knows that I was pretty harsh on it. I think you're going to be surprised at what I feel about Squadrons now that I've spent an absurd amount of time playing it.
You always play games you hate a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get out of here, guys. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, it does a ton of good for the show if you can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It just takes a couple minutes, and as I said, it does a lot of good for the show, and we so very much appreciate it. You can find us all on AIPTcomics.com, where you'll find more Star Wars content and the most comic book reviews anywhere. Every Wednesday, you can find us on Twitter at AIPTcomics. And if you'd like to hit us with a question for us to read on the show about Star Wars, we'd love to hear from you. So shoot us an email. Jim, you want to tell them where they can reach us?
Definitely. The email, also in the show notes, if you just want to click on it, is Talkin Tauntauns at aiptcomics.com. And Talkin does not have a G, so Talkin.
And you also want to subscribe to the AIPT newsletter, which has tons of great content. It's a weekly recap of what's going on the site, all the best stories, so be sure to check it out. All right, guys, thanks for listening. We hope you had as much fun as we did this episode. Enjoy The Mandalorian. There'll be a lot more to come. We're going to get out of here, and we'll see you next time.